wanted to celebrate the art and vocation of calligraphy. And today we're pleased to welcome Shelby Barentine, who is a calligrapher here, local in Spokane, who's going to share a little bit about the art and vocation of calligraphy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is pretty special. I don't get a crowd to just talk to about lettering. Buckle your belts. No, yeah, thank you for inviting me and for being interested. And last night, as I was sort of wrapping up my notes, I thought, oh, I like the end the best. So I'm going to try and start there and leave time for you brave souls to play around with these clipboards and these pens that Don brought. If you can't hear me, raise your hand and say, talk up or something. But my husband and I, he's here today, we're both college professors at the University of North Dakota for 25 years. We're Washingtonians, so we can talk loud if we have to. So, anyway, but yeah, I've only been back in, well, we're from the west side, but we moved to Spokane when we came back to Washington. And there's a wonderful calligraphy guild here named Scripts and Scribes. So you can Google that, and you'll see our Facebook page. And we post things from time to time, about once a month, because we meet once a month, and just talk about lettering. So there are scribes all over this city, and some very well-known scribes, some internationally known people. So, but we're specialized, so not everybody knows about us. But Donald Jackson, I have had the privilege of meeting him and hearing his lectures several times. And calligraphers have international conferences, except for during the pandemic. And, but there have been a couple of international conferences held. In fact, the very first one was held in, I think, 1981 in Collegeville, Minnesota, at St. John's. And guess who was the presenter? Donald. Now, that was before my time, that was before I was there. We've lived in a lot of different places, but anyway, there are pictures of him standing up in front of great big sheets of paper, almost on ladders, lettering and showing people, you know, so he came over. So he's been, you know, a rock star in the calligraphy community for a long time. And definitely the calligrapher to the Queen, and he learned from calligraphers who are calligraphers to the Queen, and so, I mean, this guy has got it, so. And he's lovely and humble and just kind and just a good, all-around good person, but he had this ambition from a young calligrapher to do a handwritten Bible. And you know, at age 13, a teacher next door to him, after he was kind of failing his regular classes, said, you know what, I've seen that you can do this lettering. And ever since then, he was pretty much off and running. And that was a little before World War II and right all through that time. So anyway, he's been at it for a while. But yeah, so he's a very, very good, kind, articulate person, and just was able to organize this project in conjunction with St. John's. They were just the right people. And partly that evolved because one of the first calligraphy conferences was at St. John's in the Minneapolis area. So he started to cultivate that relationship and said, hey, you know what, I've got this idea. And that's where it all kind of started. So, my ending idea last night was, let's talk about what a calligrapher needs to know and be able to do in order to participate in a project like this. And even what does a calligrapher see? Like, Jane, let me stand at the Bible segment that you have and turn the pages and, you know, relive seeing this entire exhibit. I think it was July 2005, Carl and I saw the entire exhibit of the originals at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. And we were only supposed to be in there an hour. Well, I really overstayed my welcome. But it was just crowded. It was $6. That's how much it cost. Anyway, they wanted to keep the cost down purposefully. And anyway, we saw the entire Bible, so it was really, really a pleasure to be able to look at it. But again, I started thinking, what does a calligrapher see when they look at it? But I thought, first of all, I'd just show you a couple things to legitimize myself. I periodically do a calendar, and this is a calendar I did this year. But it's just a chance to say, you know, Donald really invented the lettering that is in this Bible. 3 or 4 different scripts, but the handwritten script. But you can see how much they vary. This is just done with a, you know, a pen tip that has a round head. Can I find that one? Yes. So if you can see that, see how this tip is round. Well, they didn't use that kind of tip. So this is done with a round. And I heard somebody in the group they were saying, I do script, or I know about script. And a lot of times people call the pointed pen work script. So you can see how this is done with a pointed pen. So you start going, oh, wait a minute, I thought it was just all the same. No? So then you get into, oops, I can already tell I need a drink of water. I'm not used to getting hot so much. This is kind of small, but this is a little bit more like the script that Donald used because it's upright, it's not slanted, it has some serifs, those little finishing strokes. So, and then you get into all of these really, you know, more contemporary things. And there are some more contemporary things in this Bible, which are often done with a pointed brush or something, or a real brush. So calligraphers, when you first start, which I started back in, what did I say, 1978 or so, thought, oh, all I need is just a pen and paper. Well, I've got a whole studio stuffed with stuff. And I use it, you know, because there are just so many options. So calligraphy is not just one thing. And a lot of it's grounded in what's historical, and that's what Donald did to make his lettering. In fact, let's see if I can find, I marked some pages, see if I can find the one I want to show you right now. Let's see. I think this is a nice book. I just saw last night that on the internet there's some on sale through Amazon for like $5 or something. So I paid more than that for this. But, yeah, this is a good page to show because I don't know if there's a way to make that bigger.
Oh, sure.
But
let's see.
The letters. Possible.
Yeah. I think that's as big as it goes.
Pretty small.
There we go.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Okay, well, what they did is it's upright, and they wrote with 2 millimeters high. 2 millimeters. That's about the size of the letters. So they're using quills, and I'll show you and pass around some quills. But also a similar style, larger, but this is more of an italic, more slanted. So as I look at the Bible, I look very careful looking for another page in here. Of course, I have the page number written down somewhere, but that one's a little small too. Here's a better one. You know, looking at how they finish the Y, and you know, and then looking at how well these are all done. The U. So you don't want it to look like somebody made a print of it, you know, like a movable type, so to speak. But on the other hand, you know, the consistency is quite amazing. And it took him a long time to refine what he wanted the letters to look like. And then, of course, you've probably all heard about the committee to approve everything. And, even that had to go through an approval process. So, as a calligrapher, I look at all of that. So what does a calligrapher need to know in order, especially the 5 people that really stuck with Donald? They went through some different, I guess, calligraphers that would work with him and that could devote the amount of time to it. But here's kind of a list of people who did most of the main text. Susie Lepper, Sue Houghton, Angela Swan, Sally Mae Joseph. She was a very influential person, and Brian Simpson. And then Donald did a lot of the lettering too. But one of the things is, they had to have the disposition in order to be able to work with each other, the stamina to work with each other in a scriptorium. They had to leave their egos at the door. They had to really work with each other, and partly because they couldn't, they all did some inventive things in the Bible that you see, but mainly they had to do this script, and they had to do it so that it looked like they didn't do it. It looked like maybe the other person did it, and so they had to all share this same script, and they would even come together periodically in the same room and critique each other's work midpoint and say, are we getting off base? Am I losing what, am I making my descender on the Y different than I should? So this is a cool little booklet, accordion booklet that I got that was in as kind of a goodie bag when I would go to international conferences and take classes. And this was put in the goodie bag as a favor. And I thought, oh, I'm so glad I saved that. It's so cool, because when I scroll through this is done by 5 different people, but you cannot tell that. It's done by these 5 people here that I mentioned. And then Donald did pretty much all of the capitals and initials, but they really had to make sure that, and that's something they had to bring with them to this project. Another thing that they had to know how to do is they had to know how to work on vellum. They couldn't just show up and say, oh, I don't know how to do that. They had to bring that experience with them. And they, not everybody did the gold, but this is a gold, sheet of gold leaf. It's not real gold, mine's. Have you seen this before, this kind of stuff before? Okay, well, I'll pass this around. This is very, it opens up here at the top because I couldn't get it to go all the way down. It's very, if it breaks apart or something, it's okay. But it's very, it's so thin that it breaks apart. But this is a piece of vellum that I would encourage you to reach in and just touch. And even this is just a little sheet like this. It's not cheap. So you can imagine the 250 stretched pieces of calf vellum. There's sheep vellum, there's other kinds, but the calf vellum is good for this. And this can take scraping off when you make mistakes and you have to resurface it. But I'll pass this around so you can feel it. This is not finished on both sides. You can tell more which is the writing side. So I'll pass these around for you to just look at. And then I'm going to pass around also some quills. Because I don't really work with quills. I have a couple of them. But I just haven't. You know, I haven't done anything maybe that formal. But in my calligraphy guild, not too long ago, one of our members, and she does the most contemporary work of all of us, but we sat out and cut quills just for the fun of it. And this is not well done, but it's a wild turkey quill.
So you cut a tip. You cut a tip to write with the quill.
Well, we had a quill knife and we cut it, and I'll pass this around because this is not precious, I'll tell you. But I would say, before I forget to mention it, what they did for the Bible project, you don't just dip it in your ink, you have to dip the brush in the ink and load your quill. And sometimes you can put a little reservoir on a quill that will help it hold a little bit more ink. But I don't think they did that. You see how this one has a reservoir, this steel nib, it holds some ink. And, so it doesn't hold a lot of ink, which is good because if you get too much ink on it, it blobs and you don't get this crisp look. And so this quill I've had for a long time. You can see I've used it, and it's old and it's kind of drying out and it's split a little bit. And so I don't think it would be really good for use anymore. This one, a calligrapher who was near and dear to the Minnesota Guild and the Bible Project, he cut a lot of quills and gave a lot of them away, and also sold. So I kept this one in a package because it's special from George. But I'll pass these around too for you to look at. So they needed to know how to use quills. They had to be just like you would know how to use an ink pen or sharpen a pencil, to cut your quill. Somebody did the quill cutting for them. Somebody actually did the ink grinding for them too. I don't know actually who did that. But you think these are esoteric tools, but they're really not. Calligraphers have these and use them. The ink stick is wonderful. I just got this ink stick at Spokane Art. It's a pretty good one. So this is a grinding stone, and it is good ink. It really is nice, and you do just grind it.
Is that water or?
I put a little bit of distilled water.
Okay.
Yep, in there, and just grinding it. And then you can see why it's flat. You can't really dip your pen in it. Although you can get a lot of ink ground, and it goes into this well, and then you can get a little pipette or something and put it into a container or something, and then add water as it gets a little too thick or something. But anyway, so, ooh, I can even smell it. I love the smell of this. People might not, but I do. And so yeah, it's wonderful. So anyway, I won't pass this around because it's wet, but I will set this out so you can look at it. And
what is it that you're grinding?
it's this one I think is just like a slate or something. It's an ink stone, grinding stone, and I've got a lid. And I keep this on my calligraphy table all the time because there are times when I just really want to use it. And then I really do have to have a brush by to load. And you can use this kind of ink with any of these pens or brushes too. So, and this ink stone I just got at Spokane Art Supply. It's they're a good store. That's where our calligraphy guild meets. We enjoy. They're great over there. Another thing they used, and I'm actually not going to pass. I just got this because I'm going to cut myself a little Chinese chop for my name or some personal statement or something. And this is the cake ink paste that they used for certain kinds of things in the Bible. So I don't think this is very good quality because it was pretty cheap. But it's unspoiled yet, but soon it will be used. Hopefully next week I'll have a chance to get to that. But I thought I would set this up here too for you to just look at and see. You can, because up close you can see that it's it's shiny and it's pasty. It's different than the hard ink, different than the wet ink. Okay, I'm going to move along here because another thing they use is gouache. A lot of people don't know what gouache is, but it's to calligraphers. It's used maybe as much as ink. It's it's like watercolor, only it's opaque. So watercolor has that transparent look to it. You put it down and you can still get that sense of the paper. This covers things. Almost like when you were a kid and you had tempera paint. Kind of like that, only better. So it comes in tubes and most art stores carry it. And so that is something I use a lot. The other thing they needed to know how to use was pan gold. This again is not real gold, but it's you know, used for a lot of just lettering all the time. A lot of people use this on, and I'm assuming some of the gold in the Bible is not real gold, but a lot of it is also just the pan gold that you get wet and mix up, like kind of like the ink stick. Let's see, what else? What other tools would I want? Oh, then again, they couldn't be so completely formal and stuck in the ancient view of what this project could be, because they had to have that foundation. But Donald came along and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have some, you know, monarch butterflies in there, you know, like that hang around, you know, St. John's. So, and then wouldn't it be cool to maybe just carve a few stamps, rubber stamps? So they used, they carved their own, very simple ones. You see those little X's that he had, little crosses. So they carved a lot of their own stamps. This is one I carved for a project that my guild was doing. So it is just an eraser that I happen to have a piece of wood that I stuck it onto that, so it looks a little more finished. But yeah, so they couldn't be too, you know, nose in the air and say, oh, you can't do that, you know, because really there was this contemporary aspect to it. I mean, like in the ancient world, you wouldn't see a picture of the Earth from the from space, because that hadn't happened until was it 1968? No, 70. When was it? 69. Yeah. So you know, so that helps. What you know, makes you remember. You know that they're bringing in a lot of contemporary things. So okay. So how am I doing for time? What have I done? So
20 minutes.
Okay, so we are going to now bring your knowledge to this. So what I want you to do is to pick up your clipboard.
So there's clipboards under the chairs.
Yeah, and then we're, in a minute, we're going to pass out the, some pens.
And just grab one if you don't have one near you. Does everyone have one?
There are some of the arts that, you know, where artists love lines, but calligraphers, oh boy, we love lines. And we use lines in many ways, drawing them, erasing them, you know, and I'm not even sure what they did in the Bible. They did, I think they drew the lines and then had to erase them. And so, but a lot, I like when I teach a calligraphy class is to have people work on graph paper, because the lines are there and you can learn how to, you know, the size of the pen that you're using can be used on graph paper. So these happen to be in inches, the squares, and the pens tend to be in millimeters, so that's a little bit of an issue. But it still works. But one of the things that is the main thing that calligraphers, and I'm going to show you, have you try some italic lettering, is that we think we're going to use the pen in any old angle we want. How many of you have had some calligraphy classes or lessons? Okay, a few of you. So you know about pen angle. Pen angle is tricky. So that's why I drew this on here. That this is the tip of the pen. And in the style I'm going to show you and have you try is you hold this flat tip, so we're using a flat tip pen at a 45-degree angle. So that's the way you get the thick and the thin. If you're just going to ignore that and just hold it flat or hold it steep or hold it, you're going to get a very different look. And so that's one of the things that you think is not so hard, but it is. It's hard. So, but eventually you memorize it. In your hand, you get this muscle memory and you remember it. But also, the height of your letter, called the X height, is going to be different depending on the size of the pen you're using. So I have in my pen a 5.0 millimeter pen. That's a pretty big pen. So I'm holding this at 45-degree angles, and my letter A is going to be that tall. Can you see that kind of? It's going to be this tall.
Yeah.
All right, so keeping that 45-degree angle, I'm going to push it forward, and I'm getting a thick. Ooh, I want to come down, make that bowl on the A, so I got that thin, that transition. And now I'm going to swing up, and look at how thin my pen is, because I've still got it, I still have it at the 45-degree angle. So that's how I get my thicks and thins. And I don't even have to do a pen lift, but I did. And I'm keeping it, see, at that 45-degree angle. I'm going to pull down and make the stem on the A. And ooh, that exit stroke, I want that just to be fine. So that's why I've got it thin. So, push forward, pull down, swing up, and pull down, and I've got that. Yeah. So, now some of you are going to have a smaller pen. And yes, start taking your pen, grab one of them, because I've got samples for all three sizes that you have. The bigger the better, actually. You know, the middle one's good too. Same deal. But look at how this is with only 3 pen widths, or 3 squares high. And I'm going to make the same move at 45-degree angle. Swing up, pull out, and exit. But it's smaller because my pen nib is smaller, but the angles are the same. The thicks and thins are the same because I kept it at a 45-degree angle. Now I'm going to go back to the smallest pen. And actually, I'm going to fake it a bit. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger because I'm just going to make it 2 pen widths high. Okay? Or excuse me, 2 squares high, but I'm still holding it at that 45-degree angle. Push forward, pull down as I'm making the bowl, swing up as I'm making almost a chin on this A, and then keeping it at 45-degree angle to make that stem. And then I've got my hairline exit stroke. So, with these 3 pens, that's a little bit big. What it would really look like if we were working smaller. Some of these felt pens are pretty nice today, so the thing is they get dull and they get kind of, worn out pretty fast, so you don't get that nice crisp letter. But, so some of you, if you've got a 5.0, try this with 4 squares tall. If you've got a 3.5, try it with 3 squares tall. If you've got the 2.0, try 2 or a little less than 2 squares tall.
What happens if you use a different size, if you were using the bigger pen for the smaller area? Can you do that? Like the 5.0 or the 0.5 that you use for the big one, could you use that for the smaller area, or what happens?
Oh, you mean, just ignore the rules?
Right.
Yes. Yeah, it's always a good idea to be able to do it really well, following the rules, but yeah, absolutely. If I wanted to do, look what would happen if I tried this great big pen with this small one. But I'm keeping my 45, but yeah, look at it. So I get them very squat. Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there are times you want that. Absolutely times you want that. So, and you know, people are breaking the rules all the time. Look at that pen. You know, it's just made out of a Coca-Cola bottle. So, you know, and you know, there are, and even photographers like to use these, you know, old bamboo pens. Look at how that one, somebody even put a reservoir. It's hard to see, but there's a reservoir to hold the ink in there. So yeah, and brushes.
Mine doesn't look like that.
It doesn't. I know. See, that's whenever somebody says to me, "Oh, I do calligraphy," or "I took a calligraphy class," they go, "Yeah, well, you know, that's real different than somebody who spent, you know, 35. She added it up for me, 35 years or more." But it's still good. It's a foundation, and it's fun, and it gives you a glimmer. But
yes. I suspect that 35 years into this vocation, letters and scripts, they take on a character for you. It's like greeting an old friend again. I'm curious, is there a favorite letter that you love to pen? Is there, like, is G just, so satisfying when you get it right?
G's are beautiful.
I was going to say, I think G might be my favorite letter.
You know, there are letters that stay consistently difficult for me. K is always hard for me. You can see that.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot going on with the K. And, but
look at the different ways that you
this
can
particular G is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like that one. Some of the capitals, capital M's are always wonderful. There's something about them. This is an S that I just did. And this is a rule-breaking thing, you know. I didn't keep I used just the tip of the pen to get the smaller curves. And so you're right, once you know, have been doing calligraphy for a long time, it's good. I was hard on myself. I took a class in actually Oregon, Ontario, Oregon, community ed, and I had a really good teacher. I was fortunate because you don't always get, you know, a really strong teacher. She was very good, and I stuck with just black and white lettering for like 3 or 4 years. And then I finally branched out into colors and just stuck with certain lettering style, and then started to learn others. And the way to learn others, especially back in the day, was by having a lot of good books.
Yeah.
And this book, well, is well used. And so calligraphers, you know, we still use books. And Donald Jackson hasn't written books, but one of his contemporaries, Sheila Waters, she just passed away. She was also trained in England, Roehampton, just amazing. She and her family moved to Washington, D.C. Amazing calligrapher, and her book is now the one I reference because she's the best of the best in her examples. So when I really want to go, what's that pen angle? Because it's not always 45 for certain alphabets. Sometimes it's 30, sometimes one letter can be 60 degrees for one stem, 45 for the other, and 30 for the other. So you have to, and she knows all that. So, so you go to these different resources.
Question. Could I, I'm an engineer, I've done a lot of drafting on.
You like lines too.
Yeah, I like lines too. But drafting paper is very transparent. Could you lay that paper on top of those lettering and then just
Yes.
sit there and do a whole page to see how close you can?
Absolutely, yes, and to do some tracing. When I teach a
no
class,
tracing. I would draw on that.
I do, but when I do teach classes, I encourage students to do some tracing. I teach them how to trace a few letters because it helps you hold the pen angle, but you have to trace mindfully and not too much, and then try it and go back and forth. But we use light tables a lot for, like, we have maybe the lines. And you know, the other thing that's changed is, see if I can find it, is there are, here it is, line generators on the computer now. So you can tell the computer that you want the lines to be certain sizes and the lines in between, and so they'll print that for you. And you can letter right on here if you have pretty good paper, or lay this on the light table, put a sheet of paper, good paper over the top. And Jane got good paper for you, so she printed these. It's pretty good calligraphy paper, so that's nice because it's not regular just printer paper, which you can use, but this is better than that. So, but you can layer it up like a sandwich, and put your lines underneath and put good paper on top with your light table. You can see the lines through it. But even this paper that she found, it was a little hard to see the lines through, and that's the bugaboo of teaching a class and why you might want to have your lines right on the paper so you can see what you're doing, because the size of the letter, well, you can see from what was asked on all the rule breaking is if you don't use the lines, you're going to get something different, and is good, to learn the basics. So anyway, that's kind of a cool thing now, is to have the generators, because otherwise you're always drawing the lines and erasing them, which I do a lot of anyway. But so it's a lifetime learning experience. There's always something new coming out. You think you've got it with the pen, and then you go to a different pen, or you go to a brush, which has all this liveliness that jumps around and is so delicate, and you're going, oh, that's really hard. And then you go, well, maybe I want to try a pointed brush. And so, it just, we're having a calligraphy workshop here on April 1st. Well, it's going to be an ancient alphabet, fracture it's called, which is one of the Gothics. But there's going to be a contemporary aspect to it. So there's always something, and that's a Donna Dybel, who lives here in Spokane, and she was a calligrapher for American Greetings, for Current, so she's got a lot to offer.
Mary's left-handed. That changes the...
Oh, no.
We don't say that anymore.
Well, there are a lot of really good calligraphers, but there is the problem of always brushing over the top of your ink. Yeah, and smearing it. So a lot of them turn their papers, but a lot of times what I have found is I can give all kinds of hints to left-handers, and then they figure it out. They have to figure it out themselves. And a lot of them turn the paper, or whatever you're already doing, because you've always probably had this problem with smearing felt tips or something that's wet. So, but I do have a really good little left-handed book by a left-hander, beautifully lettered, and so there is a special cross to bear.
And it's not just the T.
We do have left-handers in our group. So.
There are a lot of things that left-handers learn to do right-handed, so when you start out with the calligraphy, you might as well do it right-handed.
Oh, some do, they're a little ambidextrous, but.
I might be better off doing it left-handed.
That's right. Maybe the right-handers who aren't doing it well should try their left-handed. it's,
What kind of tool did they use for the Bible? Did they use the pens or
they use the quills.
quill?
They use the quills.
Without the feathers.
Generally without the feathers, because the feathers kind of get in the way, and there's also a little drag on them if you have breezes, and you know, the feathers are meant to have drag, right? So generally they just, they're, you know, you see them in pictures as if that's how they were used, but even back in the day, there were, if there were feathers, they were generally trimmed or, you know, minimal, so yeah.
So they would take ink with a brush and put it on the quill?
Yeah, and take the, and you know, you develop a rhythm. I mean, I do that too, with certain things. And because certain media you use, like the gouache I showed you, that's kind of like in the tube, when you, it doesn't stay mixed up really well. So if you just keep dipping your pen, you get a watery, more watery look. And so you're always mixing that anyway, so I just keep mixing it up in that little vial I have and load it with the brush and load it onto the pen. So you have to learn to use your left hand a little bit anyway.
We'll try this, it's working better.
And there are some left-handed nibs, that's what the tip of a pen is called, it's a nib, and NIB. And there are some left-handed ones, but a lot of times left-handers don't use them, but they're kind of cut. The chisel is cut in a little bit different angle, and that works for some people.
So, do you know anything about the history of scribes and how they came to acquire that job?
These particular people, or the in general?
Scribes, you know, even before
Well,
ancient.
yeah. I wish Lars were here. He would make you late for church.
The reason I ask is because one of the things that Luther took to task when he toured around Saxony was the fact that the priests were illiterate, let alone, you know, unable to translate things into, you know, from Latin into German. And so clearly they were not well suited to be copiers, scribes.
Yeah, there are some stories, and there are some little bitter statements that some of the monks and scribes have made, like, oh, I'm so glad this is done, sort of statements. And, you know, this was, but, I mean, their conditions were terrible. I mean, the lighting was terrible, they were cold, they were, you know, and they stood for hours. You know, I talk about stamina. And some of the lettering in some of these ancient books is not that great. I mean, really, it isn't. The illumination is fabulous, some of it, but you know, some of them maybe did not know the language that they were writing in. That I really haven't studied, but I am assuming that is the case. And I mean, of course, some of them loved it, and you know, some of them did do fabulous things. But mostly it was something that they were probably assigned as a monk in the monastery, something they had to do.
Either that or clean the
Yeah, right.
There's a book, The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. The whole book takes place in a monastery in the scriptorium.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it describes many of the problems they had.
Yeah. And you know,
It has a bit of gruesome in it.
this Bible, you've seen probably, I'm sure you've gone through the pages, and you've seen in this Bible, an occupational hazard is misspelling a word, leaving out a word, or even leaving out a whole line. And have you seen in this Bible where a line was left out, and they drew a little bee pulling it up, or a little pulley? And those were real. I mean, that is similar in, you know, in ancient scriptoriums. But what also is a reality is vellum is good, and you can see in some of this book I have where they've had to scrape off huge sections. either because there was just something wrong with it or they left out too much, and then the vellum had to be retreated and they redid it but, you know, so that's, yeah, that would make you shudder. And my own self, oh yes, that happens. I've learned how to correct some mistakes working on good paper, but sometimes there are multiple versions of one piece, you know, so.
Well, and the difference between one letter and another in Hebrew and Greek or Latin could redefine a
Yeah.
word or a phrase.
Yeah, those mistakes were made. And in this, you know, I had all these pages marked and stuff, but this making the St. John's Bible one with Donald on the front talks about how, you know, just the logistics of keeping track of what was proofread, what's been sent out, what's, you know, in progress, you know, all of that, because, and then, you know, what needs to go out to Izzy Plodwinski was his name, who did all the Hebrew writing. Mm-hmm. So he knew what he was writing, you know, it wasn't just that he could, you know, he was good enough to do the letters. No, I mean, he inhabited the words that were, you know, in Hebrew, you know, that they wanted depicted in Hebrew. So, yeah, it's a huge undertaking that they did. I mean, the design of the book, Donald had to work out all that. You know, everything from what is the chapter heading going to look like, where the initials go, what do we do to which illuminations. He made a lot of those decisions. And, you know, it wasn't that he was a tyrant about it, but generally, you know, every little aspect. And the scribes had to understand those and be experienced with those. And one more thing that you may or may not know, but the columns, when you look at the columns in the book, those were worked out by the computer. You see that, again, in this book, you see them hanging up. So they worked from those computer printouts to judge, you know, how wide the column could be or how many words could go. So they knew what to write. You know, they weren't just looking at another Bible and saying, oh, let me see how much I could squeeze in this line. Wasn't like that. So, okay, you've got to go, but you got one and two. Yeah.
Did they do this in England or did they do it in Minnesota?
They did it at Donald's scriptorium in Wales. Oh. Yeah. So, and some of them I did read that they did do some at home. That some of the scribes sometimes or did some of the work at home. But can you imagine the tension? Donald did talk about this when some of the pages were finished, and they had to be flown to college film.
Makes me nervous just thinking about it.
It was very stressful. And when they ran out of ink for the ink sticks, and they had to find more, and people just volunteered and said, oh, Donald gave me some of those years ago. And they resurrected enough to get it done. So we had
The gold, how do you get the gold? That gold you passed around, how do you do that?
Well, what you do is there's a product called gesso, and it's very liquefied in this case, and you write with the quill, with the gesso, and then you let it dry, and then to reconstitute it enough, you take a tube and breathe through the tube and just moisten the gesso, and then you lay down the whole thing.
And then it sticks to
And
it,
then
kind of.
you use a burnisher to make it stick, and you don't want to press too hard to flatten it because it's slightly raised. Yeah, there are people who live and breathe the gold business. Literally, yeah. But they love it. And, yeah. Well, thank you for letting me talk about this. It was really fun.
Thank you.
Hopefully now when you go look at the Bible again, you'll have a little bit more of a perspective of the scribe. Carl?
You say there's a group here in town that meets regularly. When's the next meeting?
We meet. from the scribes. So you're welcome again, come up and look at this stuff. And if you're interested, the scripts and scribes, I just brought a few.
He's
And,
upright.
We meet, we're meeting
Slowly, but
Valentine's
he's
Day.
upright.
That's how dedicated we are.